Welcome to the What's Best Forum Masterclass interview series. I'm delighted to be joined by Emile Bach, founder of Taiko Audio. Emile, thank you so kindly for being our inaugural guest.
Thank you, Ron.
When I think about packets of digital data streamed by Qobuz, I wonder why they would be susceptible to much interpretation or manipulation. So why do different streamers sound so different?
There are two sort of major differences. One is obviously that certain streamers are not bit perfect, and we have bit perfect playback for streamers. Actually, most streamers can perform both functions, do bit perfect playback or do not bit perfect playback. Bit perfect would sort of indicate that the bits you download or stream from Qobuz or your hard drive or whatever location has the same content as the original file. So it's not altered by means of upsampling, DSP, equalizing, something popular for headphones, these sort of soundstage expander sort of things. There's a lot of that stuff going on, and that's all cool. You can do that with streaming. So obviously it's additional functionality, but in high end, most of our customers anyway prefer to have real bit perfect playback. So they would actually want to hear the original file as it was intended, as it was recorded, and they want to have it reproduced that way. That's the majority of our current customers.
What does your Extreme server do differently that gives it its sonic advantages?
We did one thing different, which originated from a long time ago, where you'd have a core, the streaming core, and an endpoint, which would be separated to separate the processing noise from the management software, like the front-end software. You would separate that so it does not influence or it minimizes the noise transfer to the endpoint. So you'd had two separate physical servers. And say 5, 6, 7 years ago, that would be sort of the ultimate. You would have two separate servers, front-end and endpoint. And also Roon playback software was sort of designed to function that way. So that's the original setup. And so what we wanted to do is one server which had both. So we designed a server with two CPUs, and you could have the endpoint on one CPU, the front end on one CPU, and you would only need to load one operating system, which could also be on one CPU. So that actually the endpoint would only need to run endpoint software and not additional operating systems. So it's actually one step further than having two separate systems, a front end and an endpoint.
I know you're working on a variety of new products, a switch, a router, a network interface card, a battery power supply, a direct attach copper cable. What is the philosophy behind Taiko offering a complete suite of components?
This really started as an interaction with customers who sort of got frustrated that you buy a server and then you actually have to invest in switching hardware. Every switch sounds different, every network cable sounds different, every router sounds different. So altogether you have to buy and set up a lot of different things you do not want to do as an audiophile, because you're not interested in setting up your network as an audiophile. Nobody cares. Nobody wants to spend money on it. It's just annoying. And that sort of thing led us to start developing network equipment. And it's the current switch we're releasing is actually our 5th design. So we actually spend quite a lot of time on developing something, let's say, fall-proof, with consistent performance elevation for everybody.
I think it does make sense because plenty of audiophiles don't want to become mini network computer engineers and figure out all these little decisions. So if you can offer effectively a ISP to DAC solution on a turnkey basis, I think it totally makes sense. Tell me about the engineering and design process at Taiko. Do you do all of that yourself in-house? Do you have employees working with you in-house? Do you outsource some of the design and
Mhm.
engineering? What is the process for developing a new product?
We started out originally with Extreme. We designed everything ourselves and completely in-house. So basically me for all the electronics designs, the architecture, and two colleagues from the former university where we used to work. Sort of the three of us sort of started. And Edward, well known on audiophile style on the audiophile style and the What's Best forum. He sort of participated, and we back then we just did everything ourselves. But nowadays, networking equipment, a lot of high speed interface technologies. That's something you need to be specialized in. So we're hiring a lot of external engineering now. So we have external engineers we employ for developing separate parts. And at some points in time, we've had over 20 external engineers working on projects because we didn't only design networking equipment, but we're also designing software, playback software, a complete suite to replace room functionality, optional replace room functionality or offer different functionality than room. And yeah, altogether there are a lot of people working on that. Also, that's a thing. You're at that point in time with streaming. It's not only about hardware. There's software. There's firmware. You use different microcontrollers, new microcontrollers, which you need to write firmware for, and you need to develop software drivers to actually be able to use it. And all of that is a lot of engineering and a lot of hours basically. So we couldn't even possibly do everything we're doing at the speed we're doing now without external help. And we have a lot of external help, but it's just a matter of finding proper engineers, sort of creating your basic framework setup for rules, what your designs need to comply to. And then it becomes, that's actually the biggest part of it. And then it sort of becomes easy. You just recruit people and see if they perform, if they fit your goals. If you can communicate with them, very important. Because as audiophiles and engineers, there's one very big discrepancy. They're thinking, I would say, that capacitor, I want to use that specific capacitor or that resistor or whatever. Why? Because it sounds better. Well, there's no engineer who you can explain that to, that you want to use specific parts because they sound better. They do not get that part. So that's actually finding people to use and to work with the things you want to have done in your way. That's a little bit more challenging, but we've managed to find quite a good quite a lot of people who are very and the nice thing about this is they start thinking along. So what if this sounds better, that sounds better, that sounds better? Hey, maybe it's caused by this or that. So, and then they come with suggestions. Maybe if we try this modification, that would sound better too. And sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does actually. And you're like, oh, nice surprise. So they actually put something in and you have another improvement. So yeah.
That's that iterative experimentation that takes a lot of time and work.
Yeah, experimentation with yeah, there's a lot of that. No
How
way
does
around it.
how does the Taiko switch improve the sound?
Yeah, that's so a lot of these switches sort of impart more like a flavor, if you will, and that can be a positive perceived. It can be a positive perceived flavor. We designed a few at start. We had this. We tried several things to design several parts of switches. You just start with a lower noise switch. So yeah, that actually sounds a little bit better. It's a little bit better than a standard switch. You know, it's a little bit lower noise. It's a little bit better. And then you say, yeah, okay, so that's not really anything special. You can buy those already. It already exists. And so then we looked into the part where you start flavoring sound using switches. And we actually had a switch which I would say probably 99% of our customers would say, wow, that's really nice, sounds really good. But, it sort of bugged me. So I had it, and I had it for like 6 months or even longer, and putting it in, taking it out, and say, yeah, it really sounds better with, but it colors the sound. And there's one thing I don't think I actually told people, but I'm sort of in digital because I actually do not like that sort of deliberate coloration of sound. And I know you're a big analog fan, but there's a lot of that in analog, And so, for example, I visit these customers, they have 2, 3 different turntables and different elements, all sorts of, and they all have these completely different flavors of sound. And like,
Yes,
oh yeah, that one has this and that, that's nice. And that's nice of that setup, and that setup does that better and everything. But I'm always thinking, but they all sound different. It's the same recording, it's the same record, but they
you're right.
sound, and sometimes rather dramatically different. And for me, that's actually sort of, it annoys me a little bit. So so I'm like, hey, digital, I just use a CD transport as a reference, So CD is supposed to sound as digital should sound, a little bit going like that. And so what you try to do is perhaps improve a little bit on CD playback. You're buying a streamer. So for 16, it's called the Redbook 16 bits, 44 kilohertz. Maybe you're sort of, you want to be sort of at the same level as a CD transport for that, and hopefully improve a little bit. That would be nice, if you just don't just replace CD's transport for a streamer in the same performance level. It would be great if you would be a little bit ahead. So, but streamers, it's a relatively sort of young thing. If you have like a 35 to 50K or something top level CD transport, there are several. Yeah, to actually have a streamer beating that for a lower price point, because people want to pay less for streamers than they're willing to pay for a CD transport. That's actually challenging to have it perform better than the CD at a lower price
Absolutely.
point.
Yeah.
While the amount of hardware involved is much it's much more costlier to build a streamer than a CD transport, with assuming the same sort of physical build quality and everything.
Right.
You just have more electronic hardware to which you need to do, and it needs to compete on a noise level with the CD transport, while you have a lot of processing and everything going on. Not that easy, but I'd say nowadays with what we have now, the switch, the router, all the new stuff we're launching, our new software. If you compare it to there are actually on a regular basis people coming in with their CD transports who want to get into streaming, and they take their CD transports to compare, and they usually buy. So I'd say if you set it up properly, it's absolutely competitive, and you beat it with higher resolution recordings. There are higher resolution recordings, and they can sound better than CD. Only downside is a lot of high-res content, which is also on online streaming services, is actually just upsampled CD and ends up sounding worse than the original CD. So that's a little bit of an issue in streaming you always have. But yeah, so the goal is to absolutely beat CD transport performance, and we're sort of nearing that. I think we'll pass the mold this year with the deliberate margin somewhere in May or something. Our sort of newest stuff is definitely outperforming and a high-end CD transport, but then you'd be at least at the same cost. So this is with then the cost. It's no longer cheaper than the CD transport, but you have the luxury of having everything from the iPad. But okay. So for me, digital, so like I said, I'm sort of into it because I do like an flavored neutral sound. And I've been talking so long that I forgot what the original question actually was.
Just how does the Taiko switch improve the sound? But I think you
we went some totally other place, but yeah. So I'll just circle back to that. What we ended up doing is having a switch that does not flavor the sound, and what we did is find a way to get the noise so low, and Ethernet processing. Ethernet is actually a very noisy, let's call it protocol. It's a very noisy sort of thing, networking. And we got the noise to below the output of our output options we offer, like the USB output and everything. So noise level is below, and we had to come up with a lot of sort of new things to get the noise level that low. So like entirely new, not just existing regulator circuits and everything, which are in there. And it also takes some processing, which is normally performed in the server, and that's if you add our new network card and switch, then some network processing, which is always performed in the server, is taken out and being handled in the switch. So it's no longer being handled by the server. So it actually lowers the noise level of the server lower than whatever sort of solution you would actually use with.
Let me ask you specifically about that. I know the
Mhm,
extreme is a hugely overbuilt super duper computer kind of thing. So
mhm.
why is it that offloading a small amount of the extreme's processing to a switch, how does that benefit the extreme sonically?
The stupid, even things lowering noise from unmeasurable to almost unmeasurable to even more unmeasurable is very audible. So there's a little bit, yeah, there's a little bit of mystery there,
Mhm,
in how sensitive our hearing is and what we can pick up,
mhm,
because we're talking like reducing noise by less by below microvolt levels. And still it's audible, and if you, for example, if you look at analog playback, the noise floor is very high. It's got a lot of noise, and but it's sort of interesting that even if you do a little bit in there, it makes a huge difference. And in digital it's even worse.
mhm,
But I do think my personal sort of idea is that in digital, noise is much more offending to people.
mhm,
So if you have an analog sort of playback system, the whole way it works, vibrations, amplified vibrations and everything, the sort of distortion, which has been developed for decades, a lot of audiophile companies working on their phono amplifiers, their cartridges, everything involved with the whole playback chain, that's all been built around taking away offending sort of noise signatures. And with digital, we're sort of on a learning road here. What kind of noise actually is offensive to us and what isn't.
If an audiophile has only an audio streamer on a network, is there any reason to have a switch?
Basic, yeah. Well, yeah, the thing is, a switch is sort of, it creates, of course, not talking about our own switch, because that actually takes some of the processing out of the server.
Mhm,
But otherwise, a normal switch does not do that. But it does regenerate the signal. So you have a sort of cleaner signal. So Ethernet networking is designed to run over very poor quality cabling over very long distances. So an Ethernet cable can be very misused by construction people and put into walls and very much abused, and be very long with very severe signal degradation. And
mhm,
still there's like almost no errors, and if there's an error, a packet can be retransmitted. So you basically get error-free a signal transfer over horrible cabling. But you have a lot of error correction on the end of that. So if you introduce a switch, you have potentially a lower amount of error correction needing to be performed, although that's always performed. But yeah, so the netting result, low noise can be a bit lower. But also, a switch also segments. It's sort of separate. It can separate destination packets to a specific machine. So you do actually get lower sort of amount. You can get a lower amount of data packets presented to your machine, which
I,
can help a little bit.
I've seen audiophiles use a series of switches, one switch after another, in an
Mhm.
effort to achieve extra noise cleaning and extra galvanic isolation. Do
Yeah,
you
that's
believe this
interesting. That's
concept
not.
of a series of switches?
Mhm. No, that's actually not what's going on, because you can get the same effect. I had to try. We had to try out ourselves, but you can get the sort of same effect of inserting spools of Ethernet cabling. So what we did at some point in time is we had 4 switches, take out one switch and insert 50 or 100 meters, so 300 feet, say roughly 300 feet of Ethernet cabling, and use 3 switches with an additional 100 feet of internet cabling. Use 2 switches with 2 times 100, 300 feet of Ethernet cabling, and you get sort of similar results. So it's actually not really about that. It's some sort of delay line. It's fair, but I do have to say, this for me, this is sort of in the category of not really improving the sound, but it's sort of another mechanism. Yeah.
In your announcements about the sonic benefits of the Switch, I'm going to quote some excerpts from some of your marketing copy. On the
Mhm.
Alcivox loudspeakers with its huge dual bass ribbons, it's almost like there's this plus 6 dB boost at 20 hertz.
Mhm.
It produces shockwave-like bass, like if you went from an underpowered amplifier to something with power to spare. And in a release describing the sonic differences between the large switch and the small switch, you write, the larger one significantly increases bass definition, impact, and extension, very similar to adding subwoofers.
Mhm.
At What's Best, we joke that I am the acting chief of hyperbole police. And when I see marketing copy like that, it makes me want to send a squad car for you and pick you up and bring you back to the station for questioning.
It's
So
actually.
please help me understand what you're
Mhm.
talking about and how a seemingly mere switch can result in something like adding subwoofers or a 6 dB boost.
Mhm. Mm. Actually, that's not really a marketing sort of thing, but that's a collection of posts I made on What's Best forum to explain differences to our user, replying to questions about people writing on What's Best forum.
Mhm.
And our guy, Christian, who works here at Taiko, he collected everything and put it into one document for people to catch up, because the thread is so busy that people are like jumping in and they say, okay, I've missed 40 pages. I'm not going to read back 40 pages to catch up on the switch. So we got a lot of repeating questions. So Christian put a lot of posts I made into one document. So here you can read up, fast track read up. So it's not really an official sort of sales brief or whatever. But yes, so actually this is one of the things which is something we focused on in the extreme design, sort of a hallmark.
Mhm.
It does produce more bass, deeper bass, and more defined bass. And we've been on that track. On that, maybe it's a thing. I may focus on it. I think it's really important. And I find macro and micro dynamics very important. But bass performance, somehow lower noise always translates in better dynamics and better bass performance. If the noise reduction we do apply results in that, I'm actually a satisfied person, and I think, okay, that's the right track. So that's what like a sort of a benchmark we developed. And the more noise reduction you apply, the thing which improves most is bass.
Interesting.
And we did actually move to the LC-Fox loudspeakers. They're a huge help. I used other speakers before. We had REL subwoofers, then we had REL subwoofer stacks and everything. But they produce bass, and they produce bass to deep frequencies, but this is ribbon bass, and ribbon bass is very different. You've heard ribbons plenty of times. So bass in ribbons is more I'd like to say better defined, or yeah, for me it's more audible. Let me put it that way. Let
So
me just.
it's interesting that reducing the noise tends to have an even more significant impact on the lower frequencies than the higher frequencies.
It does. Yes, it absolutely does.
Interesting.
It's in there. Yeah. And yeah. Interesting.
Why do different power chords affect the sound of a purely digital device? Is it once again back to a noise question, or are there other things going on as well?
No, it's. I think people are always looking just at what comes out of the device, but it's not like that. It's basically generated everywhere. So each device, whatever you buy, it's an amplifier, it's preamplifier, phono stage, whatever. Everything which is mains power is also uh, contaminates. Can we use contaminate, or is it very disrespectful? It
Fine.
also contaminates the mains, and
Uh,
it's all connected, and noise travels everywhere. So it's not like noise. You can sort of block noise on one end and it only comes out the other end. It doesn't work like that. It just travels everywhere. It radiates. It's like an antenna. You have an antenna, it's connected only on one end, but the signal is everywhere. So these signals are everywhere in your system. If you put some sort of device, actually your entire home is connected. If you have some sort of appliance there, a mains powered appliance behind you, and it's plugged into the wall, I can see it on your screen or something, that actually has some sort of effect. To what extent it's audible, yeah, that's something else. But yeah, everything is really connected. Same story as via router and the switch. You can insert a switch, and then your router still influence the sound.
mhm.
There's a technical reason, but there's also just a noise issue with every device being connected and every electronic device in your house in your home influencing sound. And power cords are just part of it, and they radiate, and they have electrical, and they actually also have some sort of effect on higher frequency behavior of on current draw.
I,
They
I think that you are not planning to introduce a Taiko USB cable. Is there a particular USB cable that you recommend to your clients to go to their DACs?
No, I do not, but I do use one myself specifically. It's called an Intona, which I really use because to me it's dead on neutral,
Mhm.
and it's also very tight USB spec, so I can always be sort of sure that it's. I would say it's not the most musical sounding cable you could buy,
Mhm.
but there are more musical options, I'd say, which people prefer, which most people would prefer, because in audiophile, the whole cabling thing in audiophile, there's a lot of uh, uh, there's a lot surrounding more musical sounding cables for whatever reason, or yeah, you can tune your sound with them, obviously. And this one is dead on neutral. If somebody wants something, I'm just going to say, if you want a neutral, that's the most neutral one I've heard. It may not be the most pleasing one because it's also very unforgiving, but it's my preferred USB cable just for being absolutely neutral. And if you screw something up, it's not going to hide it from you. So that's a good reason to use something like that. Yeah.
What is the sonic benefit of the new network interface card?
It's actually only to be able to use one-on-one. It's actually not much better than what's already inside the Extreme, but
Mhm.
it allows you to use the new interface we're using, so the direct attach cable, and move some of the error correction, some of the processing out of the server into the switch.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
that's why you need both. If you only use the switch, you do not get that benefit. So you need the network card and switch combination to actually have reduced processing inside the server.
And how does the router, the new Taiko router, improve the sound?
Yeah, that's sort of like your traffic cop.
Mhm.
So your router sort of arranges your network traffic. It sets parameters, all sorts of parameters, which define which defines the traffic itself, but it also segments traffic. So you can create a separate audio network where no traffic is shared with other networking. So you could create a different home network. You could create a different network for televisions or video streaming, and a different network for your audio, and you can reconfigure all of them in whatever way possible. But also it runs software, and we have a lot of some of it is already being incorporated, but we have a lot of technology on file. It's still a bit perfect, but we do change things to files to make them sound better, but it's still a bit perfect. So it's sort of, the best way to describe it is some sort of file cleaning operation, and that can be performed in your router as well. And in the future, it can also run sort of a front-end version of our music software, so you can offload even further from the stream. You can offload even more from the server, from the streamer, making it even lower noise than it is now. And then you get sort of a more distributed load and actually more improvements, but this is all future technology. We're also working on a new method of transportation which replaces Ethernet networking. So now we're using Ethernet networking for audio streaming because it's there and there's no alternative.
Right.
Really. And so we're developing a new one for Ethernet networking. But then obviously you need a router because you still need internet somewhere. But then you would not have Ethernet running to your streamer anymore. So that's Ethernet. Ethernet is not the right description, but it's a TCP/IP as a protocol. That's called TCP/IP. That's going to be replaced by something else. But for that, you actually need a router. Otherwise, you cannot replace it, and you need a switch supporting it and a network card supporting it. So there we go. that's what we're all introducing in different stages. So basically, what we're working towards is having protocols and technologies which do not exist yet, but which are designed to transport audio data in a way we think is optimal. I have to say we think, maybe we're wrong somewhere or not perfect. But the beauty about software is you can change it, and as long as you have the hardware and you do everything, you do software and hardware combined, then you can just modify and go along and keep improving things. I think for software, things will keep improving for years, and and there's a lot of future, for me, exciting stuff.
Well, we're going to get to that in a second. You've described the router as including a problem-solving power supply. What does that mean?
Oh, that's actually new. No, we've developed a battery power supply, and basically it's called problem solving because it takes away. It's not just a battery power supply, but we'll leave that for our May launch of the product to disclose. But this is actually, obviously you do not need a power cord. It does away with all issues of noise entering it from that side, and it's actually not easy to make a battery power supply sound competitive or better than a linear power supply, because you can really overbuild a linear power supply to really sound very good and sound better than most battery supplies on the market. But we've spent a lot of time and effort into getting a battery supply which is competitive and actually even sounding, for me it sounds better than whatever sort of hefty things we do to linear power supplies, and we've built huge linear power supplies. I'd say cubic meters of several hundred lbs weighing monstrous things. But this does actually solve an issue with ground leaks, current paths, power cords and everything, and you have the same performance day and night, of course, because it's always the same. It's constant performance. And this is also something a lot of our customers complaining about, and increasingly complaining about, with a lot of transformers, for example, being very susceptible to noise from solar inverters. And there's just a lot more mains pollution, and it's higher frequency harmonics from all sorts of things, renewable energy, power regeneration and everything, which is quite harmful for our systems. And I think it's actually going to be a lot worse than it is now. So for me, it's a problem-solving power supply. So hence the problem-solving phrase.
I understand you're trying to work on this new system to move your clients away from Ethernet cables.
Mhm.
Presently, to your ears, do Ethernet cables sound different?
They do, yeah.
Why
Every
is
cable
that?
sounds different.
Why is that? Is it go back to another noise issue that some Ethernet cables are better at rejecting the noise, or why do Ethernet cables sound different?
Yeah, there's just an analog signal traveling through them, and you have small things like small electric values, inductance,
Mhm.
capacitance, etc., which sort of
Mm.
alters the edges. It's
Mhm.
sort of a square wave, but it can go a little bit like this. Oh wait, I have a whiteboard here. Hold on. Let me just. If you have like a CMOS signal, let's see, I hope that this works. It's basically something like this, right? But it's going to overshoot, so it's doing this, basically roughly. And what any all sort of cables do is affect this a little bit. But not only that, so this actually can sound softer or harsher, but there's also this sort of this eye pattern sort of thing, which I cannot draw. I'm unable to, but that's sort of a data integrity thing, which also differs for each cable. And if it's a good, some cables just sound better while having way worse electrical transmission characteristics, and they just sound a lot better. There's a lot of that. It's sort of interesting and intriguing. I don't actually have a full explanation for that, why
Mhm.
something performing absolutely inferior
Mhm.
sounds better, but it does happen. It's like I said, the first switches we did was actually they actually technically performed much worse, but did sound better,
Mhm. Mhm. Interesting.
but unsatisfactory, unfortunately. So
Beyond
there's
beyond the new products we've discussed so far, what else are you working on in your R&D laboratory? What are some further on the drawing board products we should expect from Taiko in the future?
yes, we are working on a new interface to replace USB. It's actually
Mhm.
finished. The interface is finished, and we have a first product coming out, which has analog outputs and digital outputs, but limited to SPDIF, BNC, well, and RCA out, which you can put into the server, and then you have direct analog out. But it's not really, that's not what's special about it at all. What's
Mhm.
special about it is that it does away with the USB to I2S microcontroller,
Mhm.
which about virtually everybody uses or has to use, because it's the only ready sort of building block you can buy to transport high-res digital audio.
Mhm.
See, SPDIF is limited to
Mhm.
24192. Then
Mhm.
you have a sort of smarter solution using dual AES or dual digital cables, splitting it up to get up to higher sampling rates. But it's all sort of trickery to try and squeeze more performance from a very ancient interface, which was
Mhm.
designed way back to transport 16/44.1.
Mhm.
and and there's been no innovation to that. And obviously personally, I don't know exactly why innovation stopped, but I sort of think that the lack of enthusiasm, interest in SACD,
Mhm.
that sort of did away or stopped large company investments into further developing digital audio. I mean, the big chip manufacturers, Texas Instruments, it stopped producing DEC chips or
Mhm.
introducing new DEC chips limited to 24192. Well, Philips is still at 1644.1, although it can do a little bit more. But all these sort of all development there stopped, and I think there's just not enough market adaptation. And if it's not commercially interesting, nothing's being developed. So now we're sort of stuck with a lot of smaller, relatively smaller compared to Sony, Philips, etc. we're all high-end companies are obviously very small compared to that sort of caliber,
Mhm.
where you have to develop something new. It's not that easy, and you need a lot of capacity. There's a lot of hours going into it.
Mhm.
There's a lot of development. We've had I think just we had obviously USB audio was introduced, but that was sort of about it. And that's what everybody is using and what we have to use, because just if you use a different controller and you do some sort of custom solution, you actually also have to write drivers to go with it and everything. And so all of the a lot of deck manufacturers, they're hardware designers. They're not software designers, so they're not going to want to be involved with writing a whole driver. And actually, that can be a more time-consuming project than designing a complete hardware appliance. The software is very, very labor-intensive. There's a lot of hours going into that, and so we did actually pick that up, and we're developing. We're actually really developing a new interface. We've got some interest from other deck manufacturers to adopt and to. So I'm hoping it's going to take off. That people adopt and that we, as a smaller company, not as large as Sony, Philips.
You'll be creating a new standard.
Hopefully, yes, that's the goal, and it is developed and it is ready, and we're launching a first product. If enough people to buy, then we can further develop, and hopefully it's something which will be commonly used. And it really is a completely different world than USB, which is really our biggest. I think there's we milked it for all it got. Let me put it that way. So we got a lot out of our USB, a lot of competing sort of streamers, builders. They offer I2S, SPDIF, or AES as their best performing output, not USB. USB is only used as, well, because we have to offer it, but for us it's the main sort of output we offer, and we really really had it under control, and we get really good performance from it. But we've reached the end of what we can milk it for, so the only way forward is to design something new. Okay. That's sort of and that's what we've been doing.
What else would you like to tell us about Taiko that we have not yet discussed?
I think I sort of went through so much that I think it all sort of fast revenue, didn't it? I don't.
Okay. Well, Emile, thank you so much for joining us. This has been wonderful.
Thank you. Well.